Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the Remington Model 14 1/2, a slide-action commercial rifle that surprisingly found its way into an auxiliary role in the Great War. This is going to be fun, but first, let's run it through the light box. With an overall length of 41.2 inches, I found this gun to be a little longer on paper than I thought it was in my hands, probably because of its easy 7 pounds in weight. The tubular magazine holds 11 cartridges, in this case 4440. Now today's episode was filmed well in advance of our new sponsor, so I've changed clothes since then, but I want to make sure that I update our message to be as accurate and modern as possible. So, number one, it's hard to estimate the cost of this show other than being extremely expensive. It's not like we hire an animator and shoot obsolete cartridges all day, but 90% of that cost is footed by you guys, the viewers, who come by and donate to our Utreon or Patreon pages. This has been extremely critical lately because, frankly, YouTube funds have ground to a near halt. They do not seem to prefer our content anymore. But we know you guys do, so thank you for chipping in. Now, roughly about 10% of production is now accounted for by, you won't believe this because I haven't mentioned it a bunch of times already, Ballistol, which we were already using, thankfully, before we even started. Well, actually, before I started producing the show, I've been using this stuff for a long time because it's a universal oil, and that makes it excellent for a number of applications. But something I learned when I started shooting black powder was that this dilutes very well in water, and so you can do various concentrations of Ballistol and water in a handy little spray bottle. And I have found that I actually prefer what is now known as moose milk to the aerosol cans, as long as I have the space to use them properly. So if I'm on the range, I might grab the aerosol, but if I'm working at home and I want to set a gun away for a frankly long period of time, or I'm worried that there might still be some salts or things in the barrel, I'm gonna mix up a little bit of moose milk, and I'm probably going to just spray it onto a rag and get it everywhere because I did not set the sprayer correctly, but that's okay, we're still gonna film. And I'll frankly just wipe my gun down this way. The water tends to evaporate pretty quickly, and you end up with this really nice film on the gun that protects it and keeps rust away. And unique to Ballistol, it does not, after years of sitting there, form any sort of hardened surface or gunk or gack like you get with WD-40. So I highly recommend that you check this product out if you want to preserve your collection. Alright, let's get into the history stuff. Since today's firearm was produced by Remington Arms, and it's been a while since we've discussed them, let's quickly do a rundown. At age 23, Othais Remington the Jr. began his own gun-making business thanks to a successful demonstration of his own flintlock rifle. By 1828, he had set up a proper shop in Ilion, New York. Following his death, his family did manage to run the business for a while, but ultimately sold the concern in 1888. The buyers would be Marcellus Hartley and partners. Hartley was a big name that we've seen plenty before in sporting goods and firearms retailing. Hartley and gang would rename the business to the Remington Arms Company. Now, during the initial years leading to this rifle here, Remington would be merged with the Union Metallic Cartridge Company. This was creatively named Remington UMC. God, I hope no one was paid for that. Anyway, this is the company that produced our gun today. An all-around arms maker, the Remington Company was comfortable producing pistols, rifles, and shotguns, which means they would often be in competition with both Colt and Winchester in their respective fields. For our episode today, we'll be talking about the rifle market, specifically a slide-action rifle, which actually might have a longer history than you would initially think. Along with his slide-action shotgun, Christopher Spencer had introduced a slide-action magazine rifle patented in 1884. This was marketed towards the military and could fire a full-powered cartridge, but was commercially unsuccessful. The Colt Lightning was a slide-action rifle offered from about the same time into the early 1900s. However, it was only available in essentially pistol cartridges and was prone to poor extraction. For our episode today, the most contemporary and equivalent firearm would actually be the Standard Arms Model M, a slide-action only version of a gun that was previously a gas-operated semi-automatic. While generally of mixed quality, the M was capable of using proper rifle cartridges, specifically 25, 30, and 35 Remington. Now, the team at Remington proper likely realized there was a potentially profitable gap in the market, and thankfully they were already associated with an inventor who could exploit it properly. John Douglas Pedersen, born May 21st, 1881 in Grand Island, Nebraska. He was the third son of 4 children to Danish immigrants John H. and Matilda Christine Pedersen, who were apparently ranchers, eventually settling near Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which would become John D's most long-lasting place of residence. Now, we know very little of John Pedersen's early life, nor do we know about his education. However, from subsequent court cases, we are aware that he declared his livelihood to be a gun designer starting in 1901. In 1903, he would become associated with Remington by signing a contract for the development and sale of a slide-action shotgun of his own make. This would ultimately become the Remington Model 10, a repeating shotgun that we've actually covered before, but I'm fairly certain we're going to see again thanks to new uncovered data. Particularly some court documents that I've only recently uncovered. They allow us to know that Pedersen was not a direct employee of Remington. Instead, he licensed his patents, which I can't seem to pronounce today, licensed his patents to the company on a royalty payment basis. For the Model 10, it appears to have been 35 cents for each completed gun. However, I have seen at least one report saying 25 cents, so one or the other is a typo. There was also apparently a clause where Remington could buy out the whole patent for $100,000, which seems like a lot. While the Model 10 wasn't the perfect shotgun, it did remain Remington's standard pump for quite a few years. Produced from 1908, it was complemented with a 20 gauge in 1921, which was also designed in part by Pedersen. Model 10 production halted in 1928 as the gun was replaced in 1929. Now, the design work for the Model 10 had been finished apparently in 1905, at least as far as Pedersen was concerned, so he had some time on his hands and would honestly need more product to sell. So he kept at his work, and with his shotgun releasing in 1908, he managed to have a rifle put to market the very next year. What would become the Remington Model 12, a 22 caliber slide-action repeating rifle, which would be hugely popular, selling over 800,000 units through 1936. We should probably speculate that the success of the Model 12 drove Pedersen to design a full-powered slide-action rifle, but that would be untrue because even before the Model 12 was released, he had already begun work on exactly that. It seems Pedersen and Remington were determined to dominate that particular slice of the market, perhaps becoming the slide-action kings where Winchester was perceived as the lever-action kings. We can trace back the design goals from what would become the marketing for the rifle, as the resulting gun was sold as a smooth, fast operating and reliable action targeted at the North American big game market. Pedersen's core patent for the rifle was filed in September of 1908, but it was only accepted in July of 1910. Here we see most of the inner workings of our gun today. A slide-action tubular magazine rifle using a tilting bolt which locks into the top of the receiver right at the front. Because of previous issues with extraction on slide-action rifles, Pedersen included a set of inclined planes in order to jump up the extraction power over a very small travel distance, greatly diminishing the chances of cases remaining stuck in the chamber. This gun also depicts a simple mechanism to aid in the rapid disassembly of the firearm, a thumb screw that ties the upper and lower frames together at the rear. The front was held there by a simple mortise and tenon fit. I've seen it written that the Model 14 was co-created by Remington employee Crawford Charles Loomis. However, I suspect he was more influential on adapting the patents and models into factory-produced final product. And of course, before that could be completed, the rifle needed more safety features. Filing in February of 1912 and receiving his patent that November, Pedersen developed and added an out-of-battery safety which kept the firing pin locked back until the breech was completely closed. Now on our show, we've repeatedly had the debate over chain detonation. This is the notion that in a tubular magazine with pointed bullets in the tube, you could have the tip of one cartridge set off the primer of another, just sort of with a nice little inertial pump, right? Generally, this is hard to accomplish, especially in the era of rimmed ammunition. However, we do know of various armor reports from nations that use, say, Kropatschek magazines, which actually confirm this rare occurrence. If you'd like to see a forced chain detonation, our friend Taofledermaus has actually done the video. I definitely wouldn't want to have my hand over that particular magazine tube. Now, being a rare occurrence with pointed bullets and rimmed cases, chain detonation risks definitely increase when you're using rimless ammo. There's more chance for those things to line up, which is exactly what Remington wanted to use in their new rifle, their own 25, 30, 32, and 35 cartridges. So Pedersen kept inventing, now developing a twisted magazine, which guaranteed the bullets would never reach the next cartridge's primer head on. And the final result of all that work is a rifle that I don't have here today, but thankfully it's not our gun for this episode. The Remington Model 14 pump action with a 5-round magazine. This was offered in a full-length rifle sporting a 22-inch barrel or a carbine with only an 18 1/2-inch barrel, so small. The Model 14 was released in 1912, so that name isn't from the date. Instead, it was part of the Remington convention for things like the Model 10 shotgun, Model 11 shotgun, Model 12 slide action 22, and I guess they felt 13 was unlucky because bam, Model 14 rifle. The new gun was tidy and a potential powerhouse, but at first it only shipped in one of 3 chamberings. 25, 30, and 32 Remington. These 3 cartridges all shared the exact same magazine tube. Adding the popular 35 Remington required a slightly different modification, and the company expected to add either a 36 or 38 cartridge later on. They were even considering their own versions of 30-06 and 22 Savage High Power. However, market research begged to differ. Field Rep said, no thank you. And so the various rifle cartridges were dropped in favor of a different approach. They would actually shrink and power down the rifle, chambering it for the ever popular 38 and 44-40 cartridges. Introduced with the Winchester 1873 rifle, the 44 Winchester cartridge would become a popular round not just for rifles but for revolvers as well. It allowed many a frontiersman to have just one cartridge for both of his firearms, and was popular for both self-defense and in deer hunting. Ultimately, the cartridge would be duplicated by other manufacturers, who all gave it their own name to avoid advertising for the competition. Ultimately, the name 4440 for the caliber and 40 grains of black powder stuck. Although, by 1912, this was generally loaded with smokeless powder and not 40 grains of it. 3840 was, as you can guess, a neck-down version of the 44. It's only relevant to our show today as the alternative and less popular chambering for, well, this firearm right here. Being the next gun in the line, this obviously was named the Remington Model 15. No, we're going to go with 14 1/2. That won't get confusing. Woo, that is our gun today, so I guess we can get a closer look. Alright, this is a deceptively long rifle. I mean, we're not quite at a military length, but it's not really what I'd call a carbine either. So let's look at the back. We got a plastic buttstock, wood stock, very nice semi-pistol grip right there. Sporting gun, right? We have a push button trigger safety that's really just blocking the trigger. Talk more about this guy and this other guy in a moment as we come down. We have, a gate for loading. See that better in a second. Our pump action. We have a couple of hangers for our magazine tube. And then we have our front sight flipping over and coming back. We have our rear sight. See that again in a second. We have our breech block with its release pin right there. And we have the other side of our screw. This is frankly a very handsome and simple looking gun, which is a complete lie because we know Pedersen was involved in it. Now, in order to load this piece, we'll first look at this loading gate. I have some frankly terrible 44 dummies, but at least they exist. So to load this guy, you would just take your 44, push on into the gate, which is going to get out of your way auto-magically. And as we keep going in, hey, we're sucked in fine. No pinching of the thumb, and frankly, one of my favorite of these tubular loading systems. Much better than the Kingsgate in my opinion. It seems to work just fine for me. Just to reiterate, this is a straight tubular magazine. It's a little bulky here from the loading mechanism, but if we look over here, it's just a round cylinder, right? No twists, no fanciness from the 14. That's because we're dealing with really round-nosed, rimmed ammunition when we talk about the 4440. Now, the breech block in this gun is kept locked. You can't just pump it open unless you pull the trigger, or you go ahead and hit this button right here. That's your release down in there. That allows us to pump her open, and then frankly, these snap caps are a little bit terrible at feeding, so I'll see if I can baby that in. It's almost like you need that bullet shape to make this system work. Thank you, snap cap makers. There we go. So we'll go ahead and put that guy in there. And now that we have our nice snap cap with its spring-loaded cushion for my firing pin, go ahead and pull that trigger. That should have resulted in a bang. And I want to point out this gun does not have an inertial lock. There's no safety against hang fires because just pulling the trigger, just having the firing pin down is enough that we can now open the action without having to hit that button. So if you're ever confused by one of these in a gun show, you now know how to actually unlock it. Another one of those guns that is fun to hand to people who don't know any better. While we're looking at it, I should probably mention here's our pump. It's fairly straightforward, forward for forward, and to close up that breech, and back to let everything out. But of course, now that I'm talking, another one of those little horribly square-faced snap caps, there we go, has jammed up our action. So we'll pump forward to go into lock. I want to show you just a little feature on here, which is that the entire tube moves with the pump. So the magazine comes back in order to feed the round into the proper position. And then as we go forward, it comes on up to the muzzle. So pretty wild to see that go back and forth, especially if you're dealing with the twisty version. Now again, our safety is just a cross bolt push button. When we have her on safe, the gun cannot fire simply because the trigger cannot be pulled. We're actually going to hear a little bit about how that's not 100% safe later on. If we push this the other way, well, we have room to move the trigger and the gun can go bang. Introduced with the 14 and 14.5 series rifles is this unique rear sight, which actually is kind of fancy. If you can look closely, we have a letter A marked there, and we can roll this thumb wheel in order to raise our rear leaf, which is really just a notch attached to a simple flat spring. That way we can get our elevation by just rotating one way or dropping her back by going the other. I actually find this to be fairly handy for sporting rifle configuration. This dial-up design was actually another patent of Pedersen's, clear to read and easy to use. This would be offered by Remington in several minor variations, mostly focused on the size of the rear notch and its shape. Now, most 14s and 14.5s have an option for a accessory aperture rear sight. That would have been mounted in these two preset drill holes. Most guns do not have it today, as you had to pay a little extra in a time when people didn't want to have to. If I bring this on back, we'll also see a lovely little feature, which is that most of the receiver is straight on down until we get a hump right at the front. This is where the locking surface is for the bolt. And because we have that hump, this is the highest position you would see looking down the gun, and therefore the most likely to interfere with seeing the rear sight. So they went ahead and put a nice anti-glare cut right here so that you're not getting too shiny when you're trying to take aim. One of the most apparent features on this gun to people when they first pick it up is this, the ammunition indicator, a brass disc set in the left side of the receiver, which then displays something that looks like the case head of the correct ammunition for the rifle. In this case, we're marked Remington UMC with 44 Remington, i.e. the 4440 cartridge. This is an excellent little tool that very clearly spells out what should be in the gun, and for some reason tends to stand out with people better than, well, frankly, the exact same marking here, 44 Rem or 44 Winchester centerfire. I mean, this is more descriptive. Did you pay attention? No, you looked at this, because this is cool. But why does it exist exactly? Well, that has to do with the manufacture of the firearm, because this and this screw hole, like this little hole, were used as jig positions for the receiver when it was set up for additional milling and cutting. And since you had to have that positional hole anyway, why not plug it with something? Well, this little guy. Over time, these guys would actually become something of a problem, because if you had a failed case, they were the first thing to blow out of the gun because they're right there near the chamber. As a matter of fact, they kind of serve as a decent gas vent anyway. You could buy a replacement from Remington, but most people chose to just leave the hole and curse looking in the grass for whatever fell out of their gun. Later on, they would wisely go ahead and drill a hole in these, so a lot of the later guns will have a hole through it. That way, if you have a case vent, you don't actually vent part of your gun, your indicator. Returning to our other jig point, this is the takedown screw. You can use it several ways. It has a slot cut for either a quarter or a screwdriver, Or you can just use the textured knurling around the sides to just grab a hold of that guy and start rotating. There's only so much threading before we reach a point that we can just sort of pull her on through, although, there we go. It's keyed ever so slightly to have a square side. Let me see if I can get you guys a shot of that. There you go. One side, which I can't quite rotate when it's out of the gun because it wants to keep it, but one side has a flat over here. That's to keep the proper orientation in the gun. Now, why did we release this? Well, again, it's a takedown. With the screw loose and hopefully locked out of our way a little bit, kind of hard to do for the camera, we can actually wiggle the two halves of the receiver apart. So, let's see if I can do this without, oh, good Lord. Just a little and then all at once. But we're in, and the screw obviously is retained. It can just be set back down and turned in a little bit to keep it with the forward half of the gun. This allows us to stow the gun a little bit easier, and it lets us get in there to oil critical parts on the fly. Here we have our trigger group and a little flip you do that has to do with feeding. We'll see him a bit in a moment. I should probably add in here though that it's not too bad to get the bolt out of the gun. All you have to do is unlock the action, so press on that button in the breech block, pump her back, and then at the very rear, if you just sort of tip, you pull up on the rear, therefore driving, well, the top of the bolt up in relation to the gun, but down into relation to you and the camera right now. So if I pull this guy back, I can push our assembly forward with the pump, and we're free. This guy lifts right out. The reason that's possible, by the way, is because a recess was put into the receiver specifically for the purpose of letting you get the locking lug out of your way in order to take this gun apart. Now, the bolt that I now have of the action is frankly a very complicated piece of kit that we can see better in a lovely animation that Bruno's already made, so I'll wait till that to show you. However, I do want to show you how to put this back in the gun, because that can be a little tricky if you don't know how. Go ahead and get her down into that recess again. Make sure she's down in there. Pump this back, and you notice there's going to be a collision. That's because of a lever arm that we're going to see again better in the animation that we need to get out of our way. To do so, to get this to come up towards you, the camera, we're going to push down on the rear of it. So I'm just going to push there. That's going to let her in. We should be able to catch in place. See how it's snagged together? And then when you ride her back forward, no problem. Being a Pedersen firearm, this is an MC Escher-like nightmare on the inside. So I frankly left it to Bruno to sort out, and I probably owe him one heck of a Christmas bonus now.
Hey everyone, Bruno here. Normally Mae narrates these segments, but I specifically requested to read this one because I need closure after figuring out how it works. First, we load up the magazine by inserting rounds past the door at the bottom of the magazine tube, which is tensioned by one of many spring-loaded plungers in this rifle. Inserting the first round pushes the follower back until the rim of the cartridge clears a pair of rails machined on the inside, what I'm going to call the magazine carrier. The follower now shoves the first round all the way to the back, trapping its rim in a pair of feed lips cut into the back wall of the carrier. Loading our second cartridge sandwiches it between the nose of the first round and the follower. The same action is repeated 9 more times to fill up our magazine. Because the action is presently cocked, the breech cannot be opened. That is thanks to this L-shaped lever in the middle of the breech block. It is preventing the carrier from traveling rearward. This locking lever is tensioned by a spring-loaded plunger set inside the firing pin, which keeps the lock engaged when the gun is in battery. To feed the first round, we must manually lower the lever by using a button located at the back of the breech block. Let's get a better look at how that works. From this angle, we can see the button impacts a transfer bar. Pushing the button in with our thumb drives it into a ramp at the back of the transfer bar, driving the bar forwards. Like many parts in this gun, this transfer bar is performing a double function, allowing us to unlock the breech, but also dictating the movement of the ejector. We will see how that works later. The transfer bar then tips an extension off the left side of the action locking lever. This causes the lever to drop, freeing the carrier to travel rearward. The operator can now manually pull back on the pump action, which in turn drives the entire carrier and magazine assembly back and forth to cycle the action. Returning to the magazine, the feed is very interesting. The follower is compressing all the cartridges into a column with no wiggle room. In order to move a cartridge from the magazine assembly into the action, it is necessary to take the pressure off of the cartridge. The key is this T-shaped cartridge stop. Let's follow these 3 rounds to see how this works. These 2 rounds are resting in the back of the magazine carrier. Note that they are tipped, one down and one up. The 3rd cartridge is constrained so that it does not tip. That is strangely critical to how the feed works. Now, cartridge number 1 is already past the cartridge stop. The rifle must allow number 2 past, but not number 3. As we pump the action open, the carrier moves rearward as a whole. Cartridge number 1 is fed into the breech. Because cartridge number 2 is tipped, its rim just clears the tapered leading edge of the cartridge stop. However, cartridge number 3 is level, so its rim impacts the cartridge stop, preventing it from feeding further into the action. As we pump back closed, cartridge number 3 remains static as the carrier moves forward, eventually freeing number 3 into a larger area, previously occupied by number 2. This gives number 3 room to tip, and will therefore allow it to clear next time. This is the breech block, a complicatedly shaped singular part. Most importantly, it locks in battery, thanks to this lug at its top front fitting in a matching recess in the receiver. Locking and unlocking of the bolt is accomplished with these 2 extensions off the lower front of the breech block. As the carrier is driven rearwards, a set of recesses on both of its sides impact and guide downward the extensions from the breech block. This drives the bolt downwards, unlocking the action. The bolt is now free to slide rearwards. Note that it is being supported by the side walls of the lower receiver assembly. Next, we move to the lifter, which elevates the round out of the magazine carrier and into the path of the bolt. Note that an extra lever, again with its own spring-loaded plunger, is attached to the lifter. This lever supports the rim of the cartridge during feeding, assuring proper alignment with the bolt. The motion of the lifter is dictated by this paddle-shaped dog. As we pump back, the rear of the lifter pushes the dog down and tensions it, which at the end of travel elevates the rim of the cartridge high enough to be picked up by the bolt face, which, interestingly, has a pair of wings with a guiding channel in order to control the rim of the cartridge during feeding. When pumping forward, the dog pushes on the middle of the lifter, further raising the cartridge up to the top of the bolt face. As we continue forwards, this tail hits the base of the dog, rotating the lifter back down and readying it for the next cartridge. Here is our trigger. It is powered by its own coil spring and plunger, which also provides tension for the crossbolt safety. This is the sear, a frankly massive arm which wraps under the bolt in order to snag the firing pin. This unique shape allows it to also retain the rear of the combination mainspring and firing pin spring. Wild. Pulling the trigger back pushes the tail end of the sear arm upwards, which lowers the front. This releases the firing pin, allowing it to spring forward and strike the primer. With the firing pin forward, this plunger is now pushing down on the front of the locking lever. This is what allows the gun to cycle without having to press the unlock button each time. These inclined surfaces are critical to Pedersen's improved extraction. During the initial unlocking of the bolt, the breech face is pushed rearward a short distance with plenty of torque. This provides more force for the initial extraction. The actual extractor is here, a simple L-shaped blade powered by, again, its own coil spring and plunger. The ejector is a simple rod attached to the transfer bar we saw earlier. As the breech block travels rearward, the transfer bar collides with the rear of the lower receiver, while the bolt continues to travel. This causes the ejector to push the case from the breech face. Being a Pedersen design, obviously a lot more is happening at the same time, so let's set this up again, and with the breech block traveling rearward, the center rear projection of the magazine carrier pushes on the firing pin. This compresses it enough to clear the breech face. At the end of rearward travel, the breech block strikes the lower receiver, and the magazine carrier finishes compressing the firing pin to full cock. A safety improvement was added in the form of this rotating sear lock. It is powered by yet another spring-loaded plunger set into the breech block. Right now, it is disengaged, as the back of the locking lever is keeping it out of the way of the sear. When the gun is out of battery, the rear of the locking lever rises, freeing the safety to rotate into the sear. When the firing pin is fully cocked, The sear rises into its notch, and the safety rotates under the sear, preventing it from falling prematurely. As we come back into battery and the locking lever resets, it reapplies pressure onto the sear safety, rotating it out of the way and permitting the sear to be dropped again. The manual safety is a typical crossbolt type located inside the trigger guard. Pushing it across to the right makes this longer section line up with the back of the trigger, leaving it no room to rotate, and thus preventing it from tripping the sear. Alright, I've done my very best to make this make sense, and hopefully we can all agree that John D. Pedersen was an extra-dimensional being.
Like the Model 14 high-power rifle, the 14.5 would be offered in a handful of configurations. The 22-inch barreled rifle with an 11-round capacity, that's our gun, and an 18-inch barrel carbine with a 9-round capacity, plus, apparently, a rifle length with a shortened magazine with an 8-round capacity. The regular rifle and short magazine custom option both had the same price. Initially $17.25 on the retail list, the carbine was $16.75. There would also be the usual Remington trimmings and packages, C, D, E, and the premier grade F. These were guns with various extra engravings and other custom fittings. One interesting and rare custom option was a smoothbore barrel for use with .44 shot shells. But all this is beyond our concern because we only want to get into detail on this, a standard grade rifle. The same sort that would be pressed into service during the Great War. But why and how? Well, the short answer is sorta through Winchester. We've actually covered the Winchester 1892 rifle before, a lever action offered in the same .44-40 chambering as our gun today. Well, from that episode, we learned that thanks to shortages of arms, they were purchased by Britain during the Great War. The British Admiralty in command of the Royal Navy reached out to Winchester through their purchasing agents at JP Morgan and the Canadian Minister of Militia Sam Hughes. who was asked and agreed to send Canadian small arms inspectors to the Winchester factory in order to process these lever guns. The Canadian Master General of Ordnance was also tasked with selecting the most suitable options for the Winchester-produced 4440 cartridges. This was important because there was some fear that the lead projectiles would be in violation of, well, the Hague Convention at that time. After some back and forth, however, it was judged that they did not violate the terms around semi-jacketed or split-jacketed ammunition, as there was no jacket at all. So the cartridge would be adopted as ball .44 inch Mark I, using 14.5 grains of smokeless powder and with a lead ball of 200 grains weight. Ultimately, 20,000 Winchester 1892s would be purchased by Britain. All but the last batch were inspected by Canadian officers, and therefore carry the Dominion of Canada proof mark stamped on the final accepted rifle before being forwarded to the British Navy. With the 44 cartridge already in service, Canadian inspectors already in America, and still being short of arms, the Admiralty apparently kept up the search for available secondary rifles. Unfortunately, we don't have Remington's copies of their British contracts, nor do we seem to have any telegrams or letters about, well, the purchasing itself. What we do have, however, are records of receipt. So, from those alone, what happened? Well, for starters, the Royal Navy first acquired 4,500 Remington rolling block rifles in 7mm Mauser with a contract in May of 1915, again through J.P. Morgan. We've actually talked about these a little bit before. The Admiralty Technical Index then goes on to tell us that in April of 1915, they apparently purchased the Model 14 1/2. I say apparently because it reads as follows. Remington .44 inch 4,000 were obtained from USA in April of 1915, together with the ammunition and issued to miscellaneous craft and the RNAS. This complete lack of model number was likely because the Model 14 1/2 did not at that time have its model designation stamped on the rifle. The Handbook of Aircraft Armament, published in 1916, also has a description of our rifle today. It thankfully confirms that the rifles in question were full-length 14 1/2s with the 11-round magazines. These examples suggest that they were available for aircraft use, likely as a backup gun in case of machine gun failure, or perhaps as the only weapon on otherwise unarmed aircraft in use. Just like the 1892s, the Model 14 1/2s would be marked with Canadian inspector stamps, generally over the chamber area of the barrel. Now, in terms of actual service for this guy, like in the fight, I've been sadly unable to find a reference to any direct use. It also appears that they were quickly ejected after the war. By 1925, retailer A. Fleming and Company listed 3,420 surplus Remington slide-action 44s for sale. It's probably the bulk of our gun here. So, handy in a pinch, but likely used as little as possible thanks to either more mainline rifles showing up or more numerous secondary options available. But I can't possibly make an episode this short, and who knows when we'll ever get to talk about the Model 14 proper again. So let's explore a bit of what happened to the Remington pump rifles after the war. For starters, it appears that the Model 14 saw continued assembly, if not actual production, during the war years. However, Remington was pretty busy with other matters. We know they sold the already extant rolling block rifles, and of course the Model 14 1/2. They also produced Berthier 0715s for France, who frankly rejected them. Okay, lost some money there, no biggie. They also produced the Pattern 14 Enfield for the British, who found the parts were not interchangeable and forced them into rearguard duties only during the war. Alright. Well, Russia was desperate for rifles. They would take literally anything that managed to go boom. So, Remington also produced the Mosin Nagant, which suffered massive rejection rates thanks to Russian inspectors. Oh, and then the Russian government disappeared, leaving them holding the bill. Oh boy. But we got this. A contract for the Colt 1911 pistol came in, and thousands were made, arriving just as the war ended. But hey, technically, Remington did deliver a couple of thousand Browning 1917 machine guns before that same early armistice. Not sure if any actually made it to the front though. Honestly, looking at all this mess, the rolling blocks in Model 14 1/2s might have been the most impactful Remington products on the war, if not for the actual measurable success of the Model 1917 rifles that they did manage to produce in large numbers, becoming the US's most common rifle in the war. Whew, okay, we got one on the board. Because the First World War was expected to last into 1919, especially due to planning of a major spring offensive by the Entente, American manufacturers like Remington invested extremely hard in giant production facilities, toolings, employees, and more. Massive assembly lines were constructed on both liquid and more often borrowed capital, and then, just as the guns were starting to roll off the line, boom, armistice. Contracts vanished or quickly wound up at a fraction of the expected unit numbers. The firearms industry ground to a near halt, as did other sectors affected by the war as well. What followed was a sort of mini depression, a massive market correction coming out of a wartime bubble. People went flat broke, were unemployed, and consumer spending hit rock bottom, of course. Some companies collapsed and others struggled along but never really recovered. However, Remington UMC did manage to weather the storm, and they even managed to make improvements right away. As 1919 struggled along, they found and fixed a glaring problem with the 14 and 14.5 rifles. Neither were apparently drop safe. Apparently, very, very rarely, you could get one to fall far enough and fast enough at just the right angle, such that the sear, through inertia, could slip past the firing pin. Because the current manual safety only acted on the trigger assembly, it could not prevent this particular accident, and the out-of-battery safety didn't count when the gun was in battery. So a new slide safety was fitted directly to the breech block. This worked directly on the firing pin. The gun could never fire with this manual safety on. This would come to be known as the thumbnail safety, as it required a bit of force from the user's fingernail in order to engage or disengage. A matching slot was milled into the receiver in order to make the operation more comfortable for the thumb. This certainly beat just bending your nail every time you used it. Because they didn't want to chuck out parts already in production, a dummy filler button replaced the original safety. Mostly. Sometimes guns turn up with both safeties, it seems. Hard to say if that was factory or maybe someone just found the parts and swapped them in later. Now apparently Remington was serious enough about this new safety that they had every single receiver then in stock modified for the thumb cut. This becomes somewhat important because serial surveys of the Model 14s are a nightmare. That's because the receivers were serialized before assembly. Thousands of receivers would stick around the factory, sometimes for years before being used to assemble a whole rifle. It was not first in, first out. That makes serial range estimations for this gun, frankly, a huge mess. Anyway, they thumb cut all those receivers and they released the new thumb safety for the breech block. And once it hits the market, it was universally loathed. The position was awkward at best and difficult to use. It was especially terrible in cold weather, or really any time you had to wear gloves. The situation was so bad that a full redesign was done and in production in like 1920, likely appearing on the market in early 1921. This time, there was no visible difference on the outside of the rifle from the original 14 and 14.5s. Instead, post-1920 Model 14s have the same trigger guard safety as mine here. However, on the inside, a hook had been added to the back of the firing pin. When the safety is on, a matching extension from the trigger group holds the firing pin rearward, even if the sear managed to bounce. Because all of the extant receivers had been cut for the thumbnail safety, you'll often find early 20s assembled Model 14s with the remnant cut, but nothing on the breech block. About the same time, a sort of pressure spring was added to keep pressure on the magazine tube and reduce that rattle. That, however, was soon abandoned, so it's an uncommon feature. From here, the changes are more mild. Eventually, the dial sight would be replaced by a simple elevator style. The anti-glare rib on top of the gun right here would be removed from production, and manufacture ended in 1927, but sales would actually continue until the 1930s. All said, a total of 125,056 Model 14 and Model 14.5s were produced. We can't separate those numbers because they shared one serial range and individual shipping records are sparse at best. However, 14.5s seem to be much fewer in number than the standard Model 14s. The line would be supplemented in 1923 with the Model 25. This was offered in 2520 and 3220. The breech block button was also moved to a frankly better position. During 1931, Remington UMC would reach out to DuPont Powder asking for support to acquire Winchester Repeating Arms, which was in receivership. The deal never went through, and Winchester was instead acquired by the Western Cartridge Company. Long story short, this and the encroachment of Imperial Chemical left DuPont vulnerable, so in 1933, it acquired controlling interest in Remington UMC. Over the following years, minor changes would abound as the company settled into, well, their new routine, and looked to reduce production costs to remain competitive in the market. The 14 would finally be replaced in 1935 by the Model 141, which was just a Model 14 with some cost cutting on manufacture and cosmetic improvements. It also was given the frankly glorious title Game Master. This iteration of the 14 would be sold until it was in turn replaced in 1952. This time by the Model 760, which took over the name Game Master, but is a wholly different design from the 14 and 141. So, in effect, the Model 14 and its derivatives would last from 1912 until 1952. Actually not a terrible run for a sporting rifle. Not quite the best either, mind you. As for our inventor, John D. Pedersen, well, the war actually opened up his options a bit. As we've seen on our show before, he would father a very unique pistol caliber conversion system for the Springfield 1903 rifle. This was deemed a secret weapon, but never managed to see service at the front. That might have been for the best because it was frankly awful. Post-war, Pedersen's collaboration with John Moses Browning could finally be released, a 20-gauge shotgun known as the Model 17. This would go on to be adapted by Ithaca into the famous Model 37 years later. Pedersen's Trials .45 caliber military pistol was too late for the war, but a civilian version was produced in .380 as the Model 51. And he would partake in extensive military trials of semi-automatic rifles with his own toggle lock design throughout the interwar period. However, this was bested by another design. Pedersen's guns were usually quite remarkable, and yet they always seemed to be one step away from complete success. While he has many fans today, it seems he was never quite positioned correctly to get out ahead in his own era. Julian Hatcher claims that John Moses Browning himself declared to him that Pedersen was the greatest gun designer in the world, which is some pretty high praise. Frankly, I sometimes wonder if he wasn't the most complex gun designer. Even working on some of his designs gives me a bit of a headache. But let's see how Mae feels spending time with the fully assembled and loaded Pedersen pump-action rifle. All right, once more, we've made room for Mae.
That he did.
And we have, a little pump action. Look at that guy. I had to hit the little button. The button counts.
The button does count.
I'm not going to hand it to you.
Why?
It's mine and I like it.
Well, I actually do know you like it. You've
Yeah.
been on the hunt for one of those for a little while now.
I've been looking since we started the show.
It's true. Wait, no. Since we started the show?
Dang near. I mean, it's
I
not...
don't remember you talking about this that early.
I don't know how rare they are, but we've been broke a lot. So being able to find one and afford one is two totally
That's
different
true.
things.
At least we do get to have this one for the show.
I actually own a firearm for once.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get to own the Winchester 92 or any of that. That was all on loan. I bought one. I bought a gun.
Okay.
So,
it's important for him to have dreams that occasionally come
that's
true.
fine. Technically, I bought two. Because we couldn't find one to borrow when Drac came here.
It's true.
And I bought a commercial one out of a local shop.
Yep.
And then, right after Drac left, one came up to auction, and I went, well, I guess I'll put a little bid in. And for some reason, no one else bid
His
on
little
it.
rinky-dink bid went through.
I spent less on this.
I
The
know.
real British one.
I know. And you didn't have that one for Drac.
Well, at least I get to sell the other one now, I guess.
Well, if anyone didn't see it, we did do that special with Drac on his channel.
Yeah.
It's over there.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Yeah, he shoots things
Yes.
at things.
But we now have the episode.
We do.
We're terrible at our jobs.
It's fine.
Let me
know.
hand you this guy.
Pretty much the normal viewers watching.
So, before we get started, how adorable is this?
Frankly, really adorable. I mean,
As a woman, could you please tell me the adorable features of this particular firearm?
Okay, well, as a woman, I have to say, I love the thin wrist. We instantly light on that every time you hand us a shotgun. We go, ooh, thin wrist. We can't help, internally, we think that. And then we think, oh, it's so narrow. Oh, look how short it is. Oh, it's got
It's
a
not
tiny...
even short. It's just lying to you.
I know, but I believe it. As it's all about perception.
Yes, remember, lie to women.
Anyway, but no, frankly, it is quite narrow feeling. And the pump itself feels incredibly small. I mean, I don't know about you, but this feels like one of the tiniest pumps. It feels small.
I think you're just thinking of shotguns.
Well, yes, I am thinking of shotguns.
Where'd the Model 10 go? But you know what? I'm not even going to try that game.
Yeah, no, I think it's over there somewhere.
We could make it like Dora the Explorer. Can you find the Remington Model 10?
No, you have to say it in Spanish. In Spanish. Espanol.
I don't speak Spanish. We need David
I know,
for a voiceover.
Right? We just needed David come out of the wall. He heard it, and he's on his way here now.
All right, so
but yeah,
any other cute features?
Fairly light.
You're missing out on the cutest feature of all.
What? The little...
The jewelry.
The jewelry, yeah, okay. Oh, man, I totally did not light on that.
Can you tell what cartridge your gun is chambered for?
I mean, I would believe it would be RIM UMC U44 RIM. That's a lot.
I think it's 44
Yeah, it's 44 RIM. Yeah. Got all excited about the gym. You got to read all the bits.
Okay.
But yeah, no, at least you can tell that. And that is a cute little feature. I can't argue with that.
It's the most adorable thing I've seen on a gun.
I kind of like the sights. The sights look adorable.
Yeah, the little wheel.
Yeah, the little wheel.
You didn't get to use it. We only shoot at short ranges.
Yeah, no, I really didn't get to utilize it. But honestly, it wigs me out that it's essentially screwing through the top of the barrel.
I'm pretty sure I love this sight for how incredibly lazy it is.
Just because you just screw it up to the number and then that's just...
No, there's no number. Did you see?
Is there not?
No.
Oh, A, B, C.
Right. So think of it this way. You have...
D.
You're making... Think about it.
E.
You're making... Stop it. You're making this gun in like what? Well, first of all, the sight is going on either the 14 or the 14 and a half. So that's 5 potential cartridges that it could be chambered for.
Okay.
So you're going to make 5 rear sight wheels that are timed for 100, 200, 300 yards?
That's ridiculous.
This is a commercial gun that's going to idiots. So instead, you just make one component and you mark it A, B, C, D.
This is for A, B, C, D, E, D, F, G.
And then those idiots can go home and figure out which letter is best for shooting a deer at 300. So they got to go, I got to go up to...
Mine takes a D.
Okay, there's a whitetail by the barn, and that's about 127 paces, so I'm going to go to somewhere between B and C, and then, boom, got him. And you know what? It probably works. As much as I'm making fun of it.
He's ready for that. You hear that accent? That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Arkansas. No, I'm just kidding.
Anyway, but that's probably it for the cute features. Although the front side is kind of tiny. It's adorable too. Everything about this gun just feels shrunk down to the point that they're just trying real hard to make it cute.
The interesting thing is the 14s are not really that different in scale.
Yeah.
They're about that size. Shooting 35 Rem, which is
so just as cute. So just as cute.
Yeah, but that's got to be some recoil.
Oh, no.
All right, so you actually have to use the gun.
Okay. And then, important, you got to press the button.
No. You got to load the tube.
Oh, you want me to load it first? Okay,
you got to load it first.
So I'm always kind of nervous because I remember on those Winchesters, was it the 94 that really wanted to bite my thumb? Was this 92?
All those Kingsgate derivatives, you know what I mean? Like just thumb biting.
They just love to nibble the tip of your thumb.
And then you do the thing where you put the round in too far and it goes all the way in and you go, because I guess you got to start over because and everybody yells at you in the comments and they go, you have to leave the rim with the last round sticking out a little bit because blah, 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 blah.
And then every once in a while you'd have one that just didn't want to feed him properly and you'd be sitting there just doing this weird bouncing game with it.
Yeah. How many times did that happen here?
Never. Not even once.
Did it bite your finger?
Honestly, I expected it to, but you know what? This is such a gentle slope that's here underneath that just really, that's contoured to make sure that the thumb biting possibilities are just not there.
Yeah, how pleasant. I thought it was...
Yeah, it was great. I was able to load them in pretty okay. Like, I don't think I went that fast with it,
It's like loading a shotgun for me. Just
it was like doop, 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 doop. No problem.
I think it's an 11-round tube.
Yes, I think so too.
And then now we got to pump it.
Yep, got to pump it and pressing the button, obviously critical.
Which is weird.
Yeah, it is weird that I'm having to press it on a breech that's slowly going away. Honestly, I was afraid that was going to catch my finger somehow.
Yeah, we covered it in here. There's a subsequent model where that button's like where it should be.
Yeah, that...
Where you could reach with your index finger and not
as
have to
opposed
break
to having
your
to
grip.
be like, stick it in there.
Now, did you notice? Your magazine tube.
Yeah, the tube moves with it, and it's well captive, I see, with not just one, but two ribs, essentially. It's kind of nice.
Call it hanger.
Hangers, that's what they call them?
Yeah.
Hangers. Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Sort of. I like ribs, but okay, hangers. I'll go with that. And that's pretty straightforward. From there, you just rack the forward. That was very loud. And then you're good to go. You should have potentially chambered a round.
It definitely makes that sound.
It does. It's pretty
louder
authoritative.
than a shotgun.
Yeah, it's very authoritative for the size.
I know, like he's like 4440. It's like ka-chunk, and you're like, oh my god, is that like a 10 gauge pump? What just happened?
I think I'm definitely an auditory person because I'm pretty sure the sound was what got me the most excited about this guy, because I remember shooting it and thinking, oh, I can go fast with this. And I went, no, wait, slow down. You got to slow down for the video for actually performing on camera. So I actually had a hard time slowing down with this whenever I heard it.
It's so hard to get 4440 right now, even the cases.
Yeah.
So I just want to shoot it a lot.
I know.
Really want to
I want to shoot the crap out of this thing.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
So I'm sorry, we're getting so far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
You've got rounds in the chamber.
Yep.
Now you're going to go point it.
Yep. Gonna go point it, lining up the sights.
Whoa. What's going on with that hand of yours?
What do you mean?
That grip.
You mean the semi-pistol grip?
Oh, look at the rake on that sucker.
I know, it's pretty good. It actually is a pretty solid semi-pistol grip. It's really got some depth in there.
Look at that comb. You want to talk about that comb?
It's really beautiful.
Show them the comb. You're covering it with your hand.
I'm sorry. Look at the comb.
You're doing that girl thing of putting yourself in front of the object.
Yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do as a little woman. Yeah. No, the comb height's actually pretty decent. Lines you right up with the sight. At least it did for me. I mean, my cheek weld sets right on top of it, so that's kind of nice. Get stuff off there.
Okay.
And the sights themselves, it's kind of like lining up a ball at a basket situation.
It's got a little bead.
Soft U-notch with the bead front, which honestly, I kind of lose the bead a little bit. There we go. It's a really tiny bead. It's a really tiny ball for the basket.
I find it to be, frankly, kind of too fine of a sight for what it is. I mean, it's usable, it's clear, but
it's tiny though, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if this were the 35 Remington, I'm taking 200-yard shots at deer.
Right.
Okay, I get it. I kind of really need to get in there.
But for shorter range, I'm thinking it should be like blockier.
Yeah, something like this 4440. I almost want it to be like the Berthier updated sights during the war.
Yeah,
the big chunky.
Big chunks,
Just go, there it is.
It's lining up teeth in a mouth kind of thing.
Lining up teeth in a mouth.
I'm thinking like chunks.
Chunks of teeth in a mouth.
All right, well, that's what I thought of.
That is...
Never mind.
You have a dark imagination. Holy crap.
I think you went too far with that.
I am really alarmed. Whatever just happened there.
Anyway,
like lighting up chunks of teeth in a mouth. Please, somebody use that somewhere else. Okay.
Thank you. The trigger itself, pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure it's a single action trigger.
Do I have the...
What are you looking for?
I was looking for the snap caps.
They're right there on the table. I left them right there for you.
Do you want to be able to pull the trigger?
Yeah, actually, that'd be kind of nice. All right.
You gotta push the button. What are you doing? No, don't feed it. It hates that.
It does hate that?
No, these don't have a bullet tip on them. It gets really argumentative.
Right,
so just throw it in the chamber.
Throw it in the chamber. Again, snap caps.
It doesn't even like feeding them.
Oh my god.
Oh no, here we go.
Wiggle.
Snap cap scenario.
Nope. All right, hold up. Pop that out. Give me another one. Round 2. I'm gonna angle it down.
This guy is so easy to load with real ammo and so difficult to load with fake ammo.
Okay.
There you go. So now you can work that trigger.
Oh my god, yeah, that's really light. And good ejection.
Yeah, it throws.
I remember I did throw them on range too. That was pretty nice. No, yeah, and then recoil was like nothing, guys. That was great.
Oh yeah, it's just a toy.
Yeah, it's like plunk, and then you go, ooh, I'm excited. It makes really loud sounds, and it just goes punk. I'm gonna shoot the crap out of this.
Pook, pook, pook. I think we have footage of Drac firing it too. It's just pook, pook, pook.
Right, yeah, it's exciting to shoot. And then the safety feels pretty straightforward for a lot of... Actually, I realized I couldn't activate that with the breech back.
No, you can.
I can? Okay.
Yeah, because all it is a trigger block.
Oh, okay, then never mind.
It's
then
frankly janky.
Oh, yeah, that is just a trigger block?
Just a trigger block.
Yeah.
Which, as we saw in the episode, they had problems with.
Right. That feels pretty standard for several more modern shotguns, actually, that I've handled. They just have one down here at the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So, nothing unusual there. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I really haven't covered? No, in terms of operation, that's pretty straightforward.
I'm going to be honest, without thinking about the military aspect of it, right? If we're just turning our timetable back to like 1912, and we're not fabulously wealthy, we don't have one of the early semi-automatics. And even if we did, those things are like 4 rounds,
Sure.
This is an 11-round tube magazine, 12 if you put one in the chamber, right? So you get 12 rounds in the tube. It comes in a carbine configuration, which I think, oh God, I'd have to remember. I think it was 9 rounds or something like that. But even with the length it is now, it's fairly usable.
Right.
4440 is a nice lead round, fat, right? Decent for deer at certain ranges.
Sure.
Decent for medium game. Bit off for some small game. I feel like you'd flip the squirrel.
Yep.
But as a secondary use, quite authoritative for something like a home defense use, right?
I know, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, as a private owner in the countryside, this is great.
Yeah, it's got some good sound to it, so it's very off-putting for an intruder. And then 11-round capacity, not too bad. You can shoot off a few to startle someone or put them down.
You're kind of getting into an early pistol caliber carbine thing. I mean, you don't have the risk of overpenetration as much. It's good for very short ranges, and it's good for game up to the size of a human being and maybe a little bit larger.
Right.
Which is probably why they thought to use it during the war. Because as a war piece, this thing's being used by the Navy, predominantly in, as far as we're able to tell, in aircraft or potentially in inspection ships. We actually, when the Winchester 92 episode, we talked about this. Those we know were used for like inspection of ships, because when you went on board, if you happen to get into a firefight on board a ship, that smaller cartridge than a full-size rifle cartridge is less likely to puncture through.
Yeah, you don't want overpenetration on a ship.
Yeah, like walls and bulkheads and stuff like that. You don't want to be shooting somebody in the next cabin that you don't mean to shoot.
Right.
You don't want to be shooting through things and damaging components in other rooms that really shouldn't be damaged.
You are a ship on the sea, son.
Right. So, same idea.
Right.
Good cartridge. Although, I will say, which do you prefer? Do you prefer like the lever action in a fight, or do you prefer the pump action in a fight?
Pump.
Really?
Pump, yeah.
Why is that?
Pump feels like I'm able to actuate it faster.
Okay.
There's
no disruption of the
There's no disruption of the
hand.
grip yet. I was thinking, I'm pretty much there with the gun the whole way through the actual shoot itself.
Yeah, you don't think about it, but the lever action, you need to break your trigger connection.
And then you're exposing a lot of parts to the open air and whatever else right there. I can lie prone with this one more. Don't get me wrong, it's a little awkward to operate.
We always get this argument, by the way. Everybody says you can work a lever action prone, and they're right. You can, in the sense that you can twist the gun and theoretically work it, but then are you shooting sideways the whole time off your shoulder weird? Yeah.
A bit weird. I don't know. I think ergonomically this one works a little bit better than a lever for me.
You think you should shoot it faster, more accurately?
Yeah, I think so.
I feel like pumps disturb my aim less than levers do.
Yeah, you can definitely hold them like more level with that linear pump.
Would you take this into okay, you're
about to say World War I or something there?
Well, that's what it was in. It was in World War I. So let's say let's start with the soft answer. Okay. You're part of a boarding party and you have to go onto a potentially unfriendly ship. Or potentially friendly. You literally don't know. It could be whatever.
Danger ship.
Right? So you have to be at the ready. Do you like something like this on board? Yeah,
I really don't see much of a downside to this being my gun, because I've got 11 rounds. That's pretty decent.
4440 will stop somebody.
Oh, yeah, it definitely will. Good stopping power. Decent enough range for what I will be using it at.
Right.
And then I'm able to manipulate it pretty rapidly.
Don't forget, your choices are between this and, I guess, maybe the Winchester 92.
Right.
Right? Because that's the thing that's in the same category as this. But really, if you had the Winchester 92, you wouldn't have, you know what I mean? You wouldn't have your choice between those two because you'd have one or the other. The other thing you'd be using is like a short magazine Lee Enfield is probably the shortest thing you'd be offered other than this. And that's 303, 10-round magazine, but bolt action in a close space. What do you feel
like this might be better in close space, although it would be nicer to have it a little bit shorter maybe.
That's my thing. I'm curious why they didn't go for the carbine. Well, because they probably weren't actually using them for boarding. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
But the carbine would have been awesome. You're really looking at a 10-round capacity.
What was the difference? It was like 4 inches or something like that?
It has only one hanger, and I think it's 4 inches.
Oh,
that's
wow.
Not 4 inches,
no, that's not 4.
But it's something.
Like there. Yeah, that'd be pretty decent, especially for rounding corners and stuff in tight quarters. That would actually be pretty decent.
But even this, I feel like, is a little...
This still doesn't feel that long.
Look at the Lee Enfield. I don't think it's that...
I'll look at the measurements and I'll flash them right here just to kind of see.
No, we don't know, but they know.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
They're calling us
This
out.
solves nothing.
All the comments.
I suspect the reason they kept the longer barrel is because the dedicated use would have been probably some sort of guard use around the RNAS, or potentially a backup gun on aircraft, because at that time, don't forget, they were still using like pistols on aircraft. So by the end of the war, clearly obsolete for aircraft to aircraft use, but maybe an early war attempt. It might even have arrived too late. You never know. It's one of those things where it's like by the time they get it in, they're like, oh, we have this other thing. So I don't know. But I'm suspecting the long barrel is to keep the muzzle velocity up and therefore try to be able to make contact. I think with a 11 round capacity, trying to work it from a biplane at another biplane, you're getting a chance at a hit there.
Yeah,
more
you
so
definitely are.
I would take that over a 1911. You know what I
yeah.
mean? In terms of aircraft to aircraft.
Could you have the 1911 stocked?
That's a separate issue. But even, no, because you're still going to lose a lot of muscle velocity by having that short barrel.
Yes, I still would go with this.
Yeah, I like it. Although I feel like those are very fine sights for using in an aircraft.
Yeah, I would want them to have that block your sight we're talking about with like the Berthier or something like that.
Yeah. So
Overall positive reviews on it though.
let's kick it up a bit though, because we talked about the boats.
Okay.
We're gonna go beyond.
He keeps going with this.
We're gonna go beyond its serviceability. We know you'd shoot a deer with it. We know you'd keep it around the farm. We know you'd take it on a boat.
Okay.
We know if you're stuck with it on a plane, it's not the end of the world.
No.
I feel like I should have made this rhyme, but that's okay.
Right. So what are we going to next? Tanks or
Trench.
something? Oh, the trenches. I can't see it being terrible in the trenches, weirdly.
Isn't that weird?
No, yeah, it actually does seem like it would work in trench warfare as well, because...
What about open ground between the trenches?
Not great, not at all. Never, not even a little bit. Not even for a second. I don't leave that trench. I live in that and die in that trench with this.
It being a Pedersen design, I would be afraid to get mud in it.
Yeah.
I really have no clue how this would do. By the way, not intended for that at all.
No.
But we're just speculating. If it wasn't prone to jamming in mud, which I can't prove at the moment, if it wasn't prone to that, I would think it'd be kind of cool in a trench, if I'm honest.
Do a mud test with it.
Well, again, coming from the bolt-action Lee Enfields with 10 rounds versus 12 rounds of 44-40 at close range, when you can't see more than, because they would cut the trenches with the turns,
Right.
you're not getting more than 50 yards of line of sight. I'll take that.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go with this. This is
boom.
pretty great for that. Finding
Yeah.
corners, I'm not kidding. This would be awesome for that.
Yeah, it's a fun little carbine.
I love it. It's great.
Well, rifle.
Well, this
I guess.
is superior
This isn't the
to
carbine.
everything else. No.
That's it? This is your favorite?
Yeah.
Do we need to go back and do your favorite rifles of World War I again?
No. Technically, this wouldn't be on it, but this is still pretty rad to shoot.
Okay. Well, now that we made the episode, I can go ahead and sell that back out of our inventory.
No.
We can't even get 44-40.
It's fine. We'll figure it out. Eventually, it will come back.
I'll take the commercial one. We'll do a rechamber for 45 ACP.
Oh, God.
You can run it.
That's true. Not the worst, I guess.
Anyway, it's time to put May to bed.
Yeah.
Because she is winding down.
Okay.
Look at her. She's not even keeping up with me.
I know. I'm sorry. You're just going off the rails. You're in a boat, in a plane, in the trenches. We're everywhere with this thing, except in the tank. We didn't go in the tanks. That would not be useful in a tank.
No, it's too big for a tank.
No,
Also,
for that. On a train? Train.
Ooh, train heist.
Good. Yeah.
That'd be a good train heist gun.
Right?
Oh, I can see that. That's a,
Yeah.
What was it? I think they still had train heist by 1912.
Did they? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They
Oh,
had to
yeah.
have about,
That'd be awesome.
Right? This would be a great train heist. Okay, so next thing we do, we practice this on a train.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think this guy's covered, right?
Pretty much, yeah. That's all modes of transportation.
All right. I'm sorry this was a wacky one, guys, but I really wanted to fill it in because it's such an interesting little side story.
It really is.
And it fits in with that Winchester 92, and it gives us a chance to see something that's commercial and pretty cool. We don't really do commercial guns on the show.
Not usually, no.
That would be a bottomless pit. I'd love to get into it, but you figure the number of episodes.
Wait, hold on. You did tell everyone you weren't necessarily going to stick to a certain era ever again, and you were going to do whatever you wanted.
Well, we're supposed to be trying to do that dang shotgun series.
I know.
Which is kicking our butts in terms of having the time to do it. But we can only do so much.
Right.
And we're producing twice a month. So it's 24.
Well, every 2 weeks, which sometimes ends up a little extra a month.
We're roughly making 24 to 25 episodes a year.
Yep.
I feel like you guys probably want us to stick with military. As a matter of fact, most people want us to really get on with it and get into World War II and things like that.
We've been hearing cries for that since we started the show.
That is coming in 2023. Okay.
Oh.
We've already started walking backwards.
Oh.
And we're gonna start walking forwards. So
oh man.
hold on to your butts,
Do you know what
guys.
your first is going to be already?
I got a short list.
Okay.
Don't forget, I have to establish a whole new context for War II. If I go grab the coolest thing that you can think of from World War II and just slap it down in front of you, there's going to be no context for why it's better
we gotta build
than
it up.
the other stuff.
You got to know where Aunt Sue came from before you hear about the niece.
What is going on with you today? Show over.
Bye-bye. I still argue even the social media posts that I've been upping lately are still less slapped together than what most people are putting out there.
Oh, well, there's that. Most people just put up pictures of themselves.
Right. I don't think I've actually I haven't uploaded a single picture of myself. I've only been uploading, because I'm the one taking the pictures, so I'm uploading pictures of everybody else. Should I be taking pictures of myself? Is that a thing?
That's what the girls do.
Oh, crap. Oh, guys, I'm sorry, I girled wrong.
Oh, it's just a lot of people don't realize that it's very social. Because they see old gunman who's very spurgy about stuff, and they think, well, that can't be.
Oh no, he's like the biggest social butterfly I've ever met. Especially whenever you get him around a bunch of boys, they all just start geeking out about stuff, and you'll be like, guys, let's go keep having this conversation. Let's go out to eat. Let's go get food and go hang out. Oh, there's an ice cream parlor there. Oh, look, it's like based on the 1950s. Let's go over there and do that. Like, you'll just talk everyone into going to do a bunch of shit, and before you blink, it's been 4 hours. And you feel as if you just stroked out for a moment. Wait, what just happened? We just had a bunch of time together. How did this happen?
I hate politics in museums, and I hate politics in archives, because this is why we know so little about the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
Because as far as I understand it, Turkish museum positions, like a curator in Turkey, are often semi-political. And that whole region has gotten so nuts that, like, written Ottoman language from the empire from 1914, 1918, you're talking about now it's been 100 years. Most people can't read it. It's like a normal American trying to read literal Old English. And the resources to get in and out of there are very difficult at times. I've heard it's getting better. I've certainly seen more researchers emerging that are trying to straighten it out, which is very nice. But I've heard that a lot of sort of the prestige positions and decision-making positions are hard to negotiate with.
That's unfortunate.
Well, because they couldn't do exactly that without violating the patent, we had Remington go ahead and apply the clamping force without milling the underside of the barrel, and then, if we look underneath, there's actually